Hi Ed, welcome to the podcast. How are you doing?
Oh, I'm pretty good, I think.
You're all right. You're hanging in there. Now,
Which is better than the alternative.
definitely. Now, we actually connected not long ago on LinkedIn on the back of a post that I put out. And I think that's probably a really good place to start for this conversation. So the post was, I'll just read it out, was clarity comes with being really honest with yourself about what you really want. And you commented, and we had a bit of back and forth, and now here we are. It led to this. So it just goes to show you just never know. And it led to us having a really nice conversation and jumping on a podcast and all the rest of it. So one, I'm really pleased that you had that. It actually led to this, and you're here, and we did connect. But the thing that I'm really interested in, Ed, is what was it about that post that made you connect?
Well, it's specifically the word clarity. Now, one of the things we're working in is about climate, business climate, so how it feels to work somewhere. So there's often talk about culture. Everyone talks about culture and culture change, but culture is really about how we do things. And really what people are getting at, which is why people struggle with culture change, because they're trying to change how things are done in the hope it changes the way how things feel. Whereas really what you need to do is change how things feel, which is much more manipulable, if without wanting to sound, it's easier to, you'll be more productive if you feel good than if we just try and change the way you do something. If you still feel miserable, you won't be that much more productive. Generally, happy people are more productive. We just tend to shift along and have a bit more of a buzz in our footsteps. So, but clarity is one of the key dimensions when we look at measuring climate, how it feels. Do people have clarity of what they're doing? So that was the real, I mean, I just read the word and it just kind of like poof, clarity sort of hit me. I'm like, oh, that is such a key thing about it. And people don't get it, because if you don't know, okay, for an example, a teenager I helped look after, he started a job, and he came in and said, my job is to get 40 items onto the website. They resell something. It's like for every day. It's like, that's absolute clarity in what he's got to do. He knows exactly what he needs to do. Yeah, it's a beautiful example. But if you turn up at work and it's like, I think I maybe want you to do sort of something this, then you can survive that for a short period of time, but for a longer period of time, you're turning up going, I don't know what I do in my job.
Yeah, it's that confusion, isn't it? So if you're a little bit confused and you don't have that clarity about what you're doing or the direction that you're supposed to be going, or things change every 2 minutes, which is something that can often happen, then you find yourself in this, just plate spinning, you're just going around in circles. So before we go there, I'm just going to kind of press pause on that, because you've mentioned a couple of things already and we've only been chatting for 2 seconds that I want to dive into. And I just want to kind of get some clarity around it. It's a theme for today. Is what you've mentioned the words culture and you've mentioned the words climate. Now, I just want to kind of put some definitions around that, a bit of framework, so we all know we're on the same page. So in your world, what would you say is culture and what would you say is climate, and what's the difference between the two?
Okay, well, culture is the one that most people will hear. That's the common parlance. What might surprise you is actually social climate existed as a concept before the idea of corporate culture. Mm-hmm. In terms of sort of research, if you go backwards for sort of papers published, but culture seemed to catch on for some reason.
So what is culture?
So culture is how we do things. It's not the only one. There are other ones, but I tend to fall back on what's known as the McKinsey 7S model. So there's lots of things about structures and symbols, and these are all solid things with really solid metrics. We wear ties, or we all come in at 8 o'clock in the morning, and they're very, the systems, it's all quite hard stuff. I mean, okay, McKinsey does talk about some of the softer things, but even the softer things aren't that soft. Whereas climate is genuinely a social climate. How does it feel? Are we friendly? Are we hostile? Are we focused on getting stuff done, or do we just meander around doing whatever and we don't care whether, you know, how many widgets we make today? And that's really the key thing. Is like, am I happy going into work? Am I unhappy? Is it just friendly? Am I productive? Am I not productive? And then how that climate is generated tends to be the key thing. And as we, you know, clarity is the thing we talk about. You know, clarity doesn't come up in culture. Being clear about stuff isn't important. Specific. It's not. Any models you go and look at for culture aren't going to talk about having clarity of purpose. They might talk about shared values. It's like, it's all great. We all want to achieve the same thing, but are we clear about how we're doing it? Am I really clear about what I need to do to help us all get there?
Okay,
am I really clear about what you're doing to help us all get there?
Yeah, so just to cement it a little bit. So culture is how we do things around here. This is how we show up. This is our day-to-day behaviours, the things that is acceptable, the things that are not acceptable, you know, and just how it's that oneness of behaviour. Yeah.
I'm going to go for a really crazy example here. I had a short period of time out in Singapore, and both before and after, people were like, oh, wasn't it really terrible? Because I mean, the normal reputation you get around Singapore is it's really strict. Everyone goes like, oh, it's really. I said, pretty much every law they've got in Singapore, with the possible exception of the chewing gum thing, is pretty much the same everywhere else, but they have a very clear line. It's like, you cross the line and that's unacceptable. And their punishment system is, I wouldn't necessarily call it justice, but their punishment system is, but it's like, actually, the rules, the culture in that sense isn't any different. The rules that are set out are very, very clear. So pretty much the same set of rules. What probably helps with clarity and actually makes it feel a nicer place to be is that though there is clarity about where those lines are.
Yeah, you know where you stand within it, right?
Yeah.
You know what's right, or where you stand. So culture is how we do things around here, and climate is how does it feel around here? Yeah.
Yeah. So have Ed and Barbara got a good relationship?
Mm-hmm.
Climate is very much the in-betweenness. So it's impacted by me. I bring a little bit of my own psychological sort of thermostat to it, because everybody has their sort of own internal happiness, but it is about our relationship. So if for whatever reason we end up in a situation where we really don't like each other, the climate is going to be terrible. No matter how much we try culture change, if we really don't like each other, we can try all sorts of process improvement, etc., etc. It's not going to stick, because you and I are going to keep constantly trying to trip each other up. Mm-hmm. That's how, and I'm not going to want to turn up to work. And if I'm unhappy, we talk about motivation, and motivation is that bit about discretionary effort. Mm-hmm. So I might turn up and do my job, but how much of that extra buzz that is me am I bringing to the job if it's not a good place to work? Yeah,
if I'm not enjoying it, if I'm not happy, if I don't feel settled. Mm-hmm. Yeah. And what's interesting, and as I'm listening to you, I'm finding it was a conversation that I actually had yesterday with somebody about how you can get several different, we'll call it climates, within one culture. So for example, so just to extend this a little bit and expand it a little bit, is that you could have one company, all under the same umbrella, everybody working there. However, if you walk from one office to the other office to the other office, they all have a very different energy attached to it. They feel very different.
Absolutely, yeah. Yeah, and you can, and a little bit is driven by the individual going to use the word leader. We can have a big debate about the use of that word, but that's not for today.
That's the episode, next episode. Should we do
whatever the boss. Let's call him the boss.
Yeah, the boss works. Yeah,
call him the boss, because that's. So a lot of that can depend on the boss. So right from the very top, I mean, CEO level, they're kind of setting a tone.
Yes.
That will trickle down. I mean, if they're very punitive, shall we say, then that really sets the tone. Very demanding. I probably want to do just a little bit of a detour here because it helps talking about climate. So you need to look at, so the key thing setting that is the leader's behavior. Right? And there's a really simple model, has two dimensions to it. One is about, we have to keep it clean. One is about direction and your purpose, right? Are you about getting stuff done? And obviously the opposite end of that is you're not bothered about targets or objectives. It's really just who cares. And then the other dimension is your connection with people. So are you warm and friendly, or are you hostile? Now, there's lots of nuances within that, but it's pretty easy to put. You end up with 4 categories, right? So the one we're talking about just then, if you don't care about what it means to people, you don't care if they have to work late, you don't care if they have to miss their kids' school plays, whatever, but all I really care about is you getting stuff out the door. That's a really hostile environment. Now, in the short term, in a crisis, that can be really important and be really effective, because you've got to get out of the crisis and you've all got to be really worried, but you can't maintain it long term, right? Because then people become resentful of it. It's like, if it's getting out of a burning building, you need somebody giving directions, going, just do that, go down there, do that, that's fine. But you don't want to turn up to work every day for somebody going, do that, do that, do that, do that, because you are just a machine at that point. So that's, if you try and imagine, that's a top left corner of your 2x2 grid. Now, quite often what happens is that people realize they're being a bit horrible and they're just saying, produce 100 widgets today. Oh, and I forgot to ask Barbara about what happened with the kids. What happens is they flip over into the bottom right quadrant and go all friendly and don't care about objectives, and they'll sit down and have a cup of tea with you. So they go from being really demanding to being really friendly, but they're doing them independently of each other. So that's a certain type of flip-flop that's quite common for people to do. I turn up, I slam something on your desk, say, bloody well get that done by 4 o'clock. Oh, actually, that was a bit rude. I'll realize it 2 hours later and I'll come back and say something nice. But again, that becomes complicated, because if you keep doing that, I don't know which Barbara's turning, which Ed's turning up, which Barbara's turning. Am I getting the friendly one or am I getting the aggressive one? And then we start to trigger our own psychological self-defense mechanisms, going, I'm going to prep up for the scary one, because that's
safer.
I mean, it's safer for you, but it's we're going to come back to psychological safety in a second, but it's not general psychological safety. Now, having covered this, there's the third one, which is like the big Gallup polls talk about, the disengaged people. Now, you can look at them and people say, oh, they're disengaged at work. That means they're not doing anything. No, what they're not doing is they're not providing any discretionary effort, right? You turn up and you say, you got to do your 40 things on the website, right? Now, this young man, a couple of days ago, came and said, because he's really excited, new job, he's really keen and motivated and really enjoying it. He's going, I did 55 today. He knew he wasn't, he's going to get nothing other than a self-congratulatory pat on the back for doing it, but he feels good about it, and he wants to do it. He wants to excel. I've got this extra energy and I can do it. And you go, hang on just a minute. If every boss in the world was getting 55 instead of 40 out of whatever it was they wanted to achieve, how much better would we all be doing? But these people who we'd almost call it passive aggressive at work. They're they're not focused on achieving anything, and they're really not engaging with other people. And that's that disengaged space. I'll turn up, I have to do work, I'm done. So now we've looked at 3 out of the 4 boxes. Now the trick is you want to be in the 4th one, where you're trying to achieve things and still connecting with people at the same time, not flipping between the 2, but actually doing the same thing, doing them together. And that is the really productive space. Now, there are tools to measure from 360 feedbacks how much time you spend as a boss in each one of those, how you're interacting with your sort of subordinates. Well, not just your subordinates, but with your peers and your superiors in those different behavioral modes. And so if we've got 1 out of 4 boxes is the good one, how often do you think people spend in the good box, being a good boss on average? Wild guess.
Well, I'm guessing it very much depends on that person, but you want it.
Sorry?
I was just going to say it depends very much on that person.
It does. It's a learnable skill, but on average, how much time do you think?
I'd probably say it's not actually that much. I'm going to go for the lower percentage. I'm going to go for 40%.
Oh, really good. It's on average it's about 47%. Because when you're in that space, it's psychologically safe. We're well connected. You know, I can turn up and go, hey, Barbara, we need to crack 20 widgets out. And you're like, and we have that discussion and connection. There's a clear sense of purpose. I'm not micromanaging you. You know, we've got all of that space, and you have a chance to kick back and go, ooh, 20, can't do 20. We could do 18. You know, and there's that whole sense of safety, in the proper sense of psychological safety, in that we are discussing this. You know, there's no threat implied either way in it, and it's the methodology at which you interact with the other person, so that then we both align with what we're doing. Now, it's giving you that clarity of purpose, but also giving you the space to do your own thing.
Yeah,
recognizing the effort you're putting in.
And this is something that so many people struggle with. You know, if you're in that leadership position, people really struggle with aligning themselves with the personalities that they've got in their team, and the different energies in the team, and the motivations that they've got in their team, but also the direction that they're getting in the needs of the business as well. So a lot of people find themselves buffered in between the 2 things, and having that necessity to get the job done, but at the same time taking their team with them, you know, and by taking what I mean by that is them being motivated and going willingly, you know, and having that can-do attitude, which everybody is wanting a team with a can-do attitude. So I'd love to just explore that a little bit, because you've shared the model, which is fab, and we've talked about culture and climate, but I think there's some value in just discussing what can we actually do to become and live in that 4th quadrant. What can we do on a day-to-day basis to allow us to do that? And I'm going to use the word easily, you know, but what I really mean is do it with it so it feels natural to us, you know, so we feel in alignment with it, because I think that's the struggle. And if the things that are popping in my head, one of the things that I see a lot of is that I see leaders trying to be all things to all people, and you're shaking your head. You don't see that. I see people.
I see it. I'm just don't do it.
Exactly. Don't do it. But this is what happens. So they're trying to be all things to all people. And so somewhere along the way, they lose themselves. Yeah, somewhere along the way, they lose their own style, their own kind of personality. They leave that at the door, and they feel as though they should behave in a certain way. Yeah, and whether that's behavior that they've adopted from other people that they've seen, or behavior that they've picked up from, you know, their bosses that they've had in the past, but somewhere along the way they've kind of lost their own thing, and they've just tried lots of different things. So yeah, I think it's worth having a conversation about how to kind of fit into that box. What can we do on a day-to-day basis that will actually enable us to be effective in that quadrant.
Yeah, I'm going to just take a couple of steps backwards. So one of the things we look at is people's predispositions. I'm going to talk about that. So you do a lot about personality profiling. It's pick on the one that people know, Myers-Briggs, right? And people go like, I am a, and you go, okay, that's fantastic. But that means we should be able to predict exactly how you behave in every circumstance if you are this. But actually, it's your predispositions. It's that if the world was easy and you were not under pressure and you could shape it the way you want it, that's the way you would like to work. Yeah, so it's your thinking and behaving predisposition. It's how you would like to be, because it takes that's the lowest amount of psychological effort you've got to put into it. That's where your Myers-Briggs. We use something better. I would call it Myers-Briggs 3.0, but to do that, to assess people's. So what would I be like? What would the ideal world for me look like, which would allow me to behave in a way that puts least amount of stress on my brain? Whether that's learned or whether it's genetic, or it doesn't really matter. That's just me. So some people I meet are quite surprised when they go, actually, I score really highly on the introvert scale. And they go, but you talk like, I have learned to behave socially confident because it's a skill. You can train yourself to behave. Now, I have to invest effort in it because it's an unnatural way of working for me. But the more you do it, like running, the easier it is because you get practice at it. So everybody has a sort of preferred way of doing their connections and behaving. And there's ways you can get into that quadrant. But the really key thing about getting into that quadrant is that it's how I interact with you. So it's not about me, or it's not just about me. So a lot of the leadership metrics, people can go, we've gone and we've measured Barbara and she's a good leader. Yeah, but if you've got a horrible relationship with me, you can be as good a leader as you like. It's not going to work, because my measure of you as a leader is rubbish because we've got a bad relationship. So it's about building that relationship. And part of that comes from your mindset. But I'm going to get into some really unpopular territory here, because it comes about your ability to emotionally self-regulate. Because I can't engage with you if I'm dysregulated. If I come in angry, we are not going to have a good interaction, because I'm going to come in and I'm going to be threatening. That's going to trigger your psychological self-defense mechanisms. You're going to withdraw. You're going to protect yourself, whether that's shouting back in an aggressive way. So those three unhelpful quadrants are all natural spaces of. So you either shout back in an aggressive fashion, we're going to achieve this even though we disagree about what it is, or you go into the pro-social mode, which you go friend to say, yes, 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 it's all right, Ed, we'll do that, where you actually have no commitment to doing it. Or you just go, yeah, I don't care. And those are three natural psychological self-defense mechanisms. And that's all occurred because I've come in, or I come in and I, as a boss, and go, I don't care what you do. So you're going to trigger off. So we have to get into our own sense of psychological safety and emotionally regulated. And then there is a learnable methodology, which we don't have time to cover here. And usually it takes a lot of coaching. This is stuff we should be teaching to kids at school, but it's a way of interacting with you, how I measure what your emotional state is and how I bring you to a place where you feel regulated. So there's a lot, bears a lot in connection with nonviolent communication. It's a very similar sort of thing, because it's the same idea. If I'm dysregulated, I am implying a sense of violence towards you, and ties back to cognitive biases. So we have to connect as people. I have to recognize you as a unique person, and I have to bring you to a space where that overused psychological safety occurs for you, where you feel you can speak your mind, or even the ability to walk away. That you don't feel threatened by me, which is often becomes really tricky, because when people are asked to self-assess how much time they spend in that good quadrant, they give themselves quite a high mark, and then they're quite often surprised that they get feedback saying that they're a lot more in the aggressive quadrant than they think. But that comes by, so you're a new employee, you're 2 years, you're 6 months out of school, and the CEO of the company walks past and points at a report you're doing, goes, oh, that'd be really nice in blue, wouldn't it? How do you react to that? That's not it would be nice, like it would be, if one of your peers says it, he's like, hang on, this is the guy that runs the company 4 or 5 levels above me, and you're going to make it blue. It's actually quite threatening, just because of the relative power differential.
Mm-hmm.
They didn't mean it. That's not how they meant it when they said it, but that's how it comes across, just because there's that implied power in it. So it's that, how do you stop and have that little bit of conversation with a bit more connection that removes the sense of power? And that's very hard, because if you're the boss, you can tell me what to do. And there's that implied threat.
But I think, again, I'm just listening to you, and what's going on in my mind is that I think the real word, the power word that you said, which has got so much gold behind it, is connection, right? And I think this is something that is well, if we're talking about practical tips that people can use in order to just feel that, just to be in that quadrant a little bit easier and just start to open up and have that chink of light happening, so that they're engaging with their team a little bit more, is connection. Because ultimately we are all human beings, and that's the thing that I think a lot of the time we need to remember. We need to remember that sometimes just having that conversation with people, not just about, how did your kid's birthday party go, or how's your house move, or how's your whatever, did you watch Bake Off last Saturday? It doesn't have to be something like that, something that feels a little bit trivial, although those things really matter. Those things really, really matter. Let's not sweep them under the carpet. They again really, really matter. But it's, again, how are you getting on with that today? How are you feeling? What's going on with you? So just having some real connection. But at the same time, just to add on to that, is allowing yourself to connect too, because this is something that I see time and time and time again, is that often leaders, and again we're using that word, the boss, whatever, the boss is said, it can draw up this imaginary line between I am this person at work and I'm this person at home, and never the twain do meet. But the thing is that we've got to remember, when we're in that leadership position, is that in order to get connection, we have to build up trust. In order to build up trust, it's not just about me as your boss knowing about you and everything that goes on. It's a two-way street. And it's about how much are you actually divulging with your team about what's going on with you. And I don't mean just having a bit of a moan, because that's, it's not right. Yeah. I mean, like, this is, I went and did this at the weekend, or this is a bit of my story, or I remember when I was in your position and I messed up massively, but I survived. And sharing the good, the bad, and the ugly, so that people can see beyond that.
Yeah, I'm going to even stop myself before I swerve off into talking about the trust equation, but that's in the trust equation, that's the intimacy part.
Yeah, so, let's not do any more models. Then let's not do any more. We've got one that we're working on.
But you're talking about simple things, right? The most basic one was on a parenting course, right? And okay, it was after I'd raised my own kids, but it's a really powerful one. You suddenly think, oh, I was accidentally doing that most of the time without realizing it. So you come storming in going, Fred's just stuck this report on my table and blah, 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 and has just said, I need to add my bit to it by Friday, but I'm on, and go, Barbara, I get it. It's really annoying, right? So that their little phrases, connect before you correct.
Yes, right? Nice.
So I understand. I mean, I may not agree with you. I may think you're unnecessarily being frustrated by it, but I recognize that what you perceiving a wrong, or whether you're checking out whatever you do, I recognize your emotional state. I see it. I don't have to agree with it. I don't have to approve with it, but I see it. Recognize the other person's emotional state, and then go, okay, how do we? but only because most of us, when you come in, you go, oh, that's you go, you're right. If I was you, I'd be really annoyed. And then most of us go, oh, that's okay. You understand me. So you've connected with me. You're recognizing my emotional state. You're validating my feelings, which are very real to me. And then we can go, okay, to some extent, let's put those aside now. So in a way, there's your psychological safety. Go, I'm annoyed. Okay, it's safe to be annoyed because I would feel annoyed. So, but now let's wrap this kindly on and put it on one side and let's deal with it. The rational part of our brains, we see the emotional bit, go, yes, it's there, it's real. Okay, now what can we do to fix it? Which, that's the classic proverbial man-woman dichotomy. And we go into terrible stereotypes, and it is stereotyping. So sorry, this is not intended, but the classic woman complaint is, you're venting steam and your partner's going, yeah, but you could just do this. It's like, you failed to connect first, recognize the emotions, then you can worry about what you're doing. And sometimes it's just creating the connection, going, yeah, that's terrible. I have no suggestions on how to fix that, but I hear you. You're a person. You're real. What you feel is real. You're valid. Everything about you matters. Now, what can we do?
Yeah, and I think that, again, that's so important, because it's very easy to just want to fix things, especially when you're busy, especially when you've got your tight deadlines, you've got pressure and stress and everything else going on. And if somebody comes up to you and says, I've got no time, or having that moan that you were saying a bit, to just go, don't worry, we'll sort it, we'll do this, do that, do the other, and just jump in, kind of parachute yourself in. But just taking a moment, just taking a beat to connect first, and not just to try and fix things, because quite often people know what to do. They don't need you to fix things. It's often not quicker if you do it yourself, which is, again, another podcast episode in itself. But it's just,
we're writing these down. We've got a long list.
Yeah, we've got a lot to talk about, Ed. We're gonna. I think that's the thing, that it's not about parachuting yourself in. It's just having that connection first, and then the person, is going to calm down and sort it out. And most of the time, they know exactly what to do.
And that, again, that easy step, that connecting. And believe me, it's really hard, particularly when we feel ourselves under pressure. But every time you do it, it's like credit in the bank. So even when you do it when you're not under pressure, if I recognize the mini frustrations or the mini disappointments that occur in your life, it gives me more latitude later on. Absolutely. It might be that when we're really under pressure, I can go, that's really annoying. And that's all the connection we need, because that just me saying that, you go, oh yeah, I know he really sees me, he really gets it. We don't need to have 5 minutes connecting. Just that brief moment, I know, because we've got an experience. We built, as you said, we built trust, we've built a relationship on it. So just me saying it goes, yeah, that's in, we're there and we're going. But it's really hard. It's really hard when we're feeling the pressure to remember to do that. And you're right, there's the temptation to rush in and fix it and do something ourselves, when actually the other person just wants less common now, but I know it is about validation. It's like, yeah, you're real, what you're feeling is real, and that's it. And then I get
it, and I just totally get it. Yeah, we're in the same space. I totally understand that you're feeling like this. And I think the thing is here, I don't think we can think of a better way to say it other than connecting. Although connection is it, and knowing that you talked about the bank account, that will actually make a deposit into your shared emotional bank account. So it does actually support your relationship and the way that you work together going forward. But this is about it's about retraining yourself, isn't it? Because
it is huge. Yeah. That's why there's a more sophisticated way of doing that. And so if we go back to the model and say, just do simple terms, we spend 50% of our time in the good space, being the good boss, right? Every 10% more of the time you spend in that good space will increase your team's productivity between 20 and 40%, which is terrifying. it takes about a year of, well, you have to do the training, and then about between 9 months and a year's worth of just a little background coaching, practicing and practicing, coming along going, were you using it properly? Just like in any sports, somebody's coming along going, okay, let's run through that. Have you been using it properly? Let's go through a situation. Did you go through it properly? Did you do it right? Do a little bit of observation with you. It takes about a year to get 10% improvement. Right? Now, here's a scary thing. The current measure of world class, the really best, and there are not many people that actually are above it. They're 80% of the time they're doing that. But when you meet the people that work for them, they are literally the ones who will take a bullet. They will ring up and go, sorry, dear, I'm not coming home for dinner tonight. I'm missing the kids' school play, and I will be here till 3 o'clock in the morning because this has got to be delivered. But there's a reciprocal bit in there, in that relationship that cascades down, because they know that if they rang up and went, my kid's just gone into the hospital, even though you're in the middle of a really stressful thing, the boss would be like, go. Somebody else will pick up, and the rest of the team will somehow find the energy to fill the space that you've left.
And this is where, and this is where we come nice full circle back to climate, right? So this is where we started our conversation. So I'm just looking at the time, and I just because I imagine, Ed, that the two of us could just carry on talking all afternoon, but I want to kind of wrap this up into some practical tips, because what I don't want is, if you're listening to this going, yeah, a year, I don't want a year, oh my god, that sounds a bit too scary. I want us to get some practical things that people can start to use straight away. So if you were to just, let's say 3 tips, very, very practical things that we can do day to day that doesn't involve, any kind of research or external input, what do you reckon that would be? So on its simplest level. So
at its simplest level, right? The first was that be aware. And it's really hard. We particularly say people separate that, but all through our lives, actually stop and observe. I observe what's happening, observe the other person. Now, some people are better than others at this, but actually look at them and go, or to go back to a sermon I heard in church once, was when you ask somebody how they feel, are you ready for them to respond honestly? And the answer is you have to be. That's the first step. Be prepared and actually want to hear the genuine answer, not, I'm fine. If the person's having a terrible day, be prepared and look at them. Are you getting a, yeah, I'm fine? And you go, that's not the response of somebody who is actually fine. So maybe you don't, just be aware of it at that point. You don't have to do any more about it. Then the next thing, when you're feeling brave enough, is and it's almost only 2 things, is then just try and connect with people. But that all the time. So it's that second thing is recognize the emotion that's in the space. Yeah. Or whether they're sad, usually it's angry. Angry tends to be the one that comes out most at work, but the frustration, the frustration might come out as disconnection. Why are they sat there at their desk looking like they're not doing anything? Because actually they're frustrated with everything around them. And just go, yeah, it's really difficult at the moment. Times are hard. There's a lot of uncertainty about the business. So remember that person is a person. They're feeling something. They're not just a machine.
Yeah.
I'm really struggling for what's the third one, because it is so.
I think you've got the 3 now. I've just scribbled them down. So be aware, and I like this. Just start ramping up your self-awareness. This is where any kind of change starts, right? Just understanding your part in the puzzle. And so often it's very easy to look externally to blame other people and think, actually, it's because they're not motivated, because they're not happy, they've not got the right attitude, or it's stressful, we've got lots going on, there's lots of change, what yada yada yada, there's stuff going on. In terms of being aware, it's about shining the light in the opposite direction at you and thinking, right, what am I doing to influence this? How am I keeping my side of the street clean? What is my part in this puzzle? So that was number 1 that you said. Number 2, which you said kind of afterwards, but I've put it at number 2, is recognize the emotion in the space. Now that, I think, again, is is gold, because so often we don't understand how powerful we are. And by that, I mean that you can tell how somebody is feeling. We all can. We've all got that ability. So, and that can happen even virtually. You know, we're on Zoom right now. We can pick up on how we're feeling. You can tell, because we've got this. We've all got this ability and this instinct. So look at what is going on, and keep asking yourself, are they really fine? Are they really, I got an undertone of anger there. Is it, what am I doing? You know, is it there? Is it them? Is it, what's going on?
Somebody said, you know, how are you doing? Fine.
Fine, yeah, what's going on? So recognize it.
Enough. How are you doing? Fine.
Exactly, that word, right? It's got a lot of weight to it for such a small word. And then the third tip, which again, it sounds simple, it's not often as simple as it sounds, is try and connect. Yes, just try and start connecting. And
do you know, and I'll tell you what underlies all three of those, right? That makes it difficult.
Yeah.
That to do any of those, we have to make ourselves vulnerable.
Yeah.
And which just comes back to I have to feel psychologically safe in myself to be able to be vulnerable.
Yeah.
So I have to be able to go, right, because if I'm going to meet you when you're angry, right, I've got to be in a state where I feel safe, strong enough to go, you're angry, and that's not going to flood me. Which is why we put up all these barriers and go, well, I'm not going to, because I don't want to have to deal with your emotions. And actually, we just need to go, actually, I will.
Yeah,
I'll step into those emotions. You know?
We'll be bigger and better, and we'll be more effective at our role and happier. We'll get the climate that we're after. Yeah. Oh, I've loved having all of this conversation. It's been such a good chat. Where can people find you?
Where can people find me? Well, look me up on LinkedIn. That's probably the easiest place. I'm not there as often as I think I am. But I do tend to ping and have a mad half hour. At the moment, you can find me. Don't really go to the website. It's atrocious. We just but Baker Fish. So if you want to email me directly, @BakerFish. You can get hold of me. Now I'm not. If you look hard, you can find me on Facebook. Okay.
But LinkedIn's the best place, right?
LinkedIn's the best place, but I'm really easy. Apparently, I look like this, but 20 years younger. But trust me, the photograph wasn't. My daughter, it was a very good light.
We'll put all the links in the show notes. So if you're not sure where to find Ed, just go to the show notes and click on a link and you'll find him. Ed, it's been an absolute pleasure. I've loved kind of unpicking this topic with you and delving deep into all things climate, all things culture, and how we can actually be more effective at leading. So thank you so much for hanging out with me today.
There's plenty more. We'll have a list of podcasts in the future.